Welcome to episode 7 of the Expert Cruise Show. I'm Chris, he's Anthony, and we're back again for another week. Hi Anthony, how are you going?
I'm good. I love how you're going. It's such an Australian thing. I love the fact that we're about 10,000 miles apart, and yet it looks like we're sitting on the same deck of the same ship.
You've left the secret. You let the secret out.
I think people have worked out by now. But
you think so?
Yeah, I think so. But it just goes to show, with technology, how small this world really is. So today we're going to talk about princess cruises because
we certainly are.
I did a princess cruise about a year. My last one was like a year and 6 months, 18 months ago. Pretty much was my last princess. I went on the Discovery Princess.
Well, the OGs in service at the moment are the Grand Class,
the shopping trolley ones.
The shopping trolley ones, although
yeah.
Most of the Princess Cruises Grand Class no longer have their shopping carts because actually the ones that were built with it, they removed off most of the Grand Class ships. So even Grand Princess, which was the first one, she entered service back in 1998. She doesn't even have it, so it's quite. It was removed from her during a refit some years back. But they're the ones that so prior to the Grand Class, there was a class of ships called the Sun Class, which was sort of the prototype, I suppose, for this style of cruise ship that Princess really pioneered, in that the internal design all focused around this central atrium area where a lot of the bars and lounges and restaurants looked into the atrium, which we'll talk about later in the show. So the Grand Class was being built throughout from 1998 onwards, and then because they're big ships, they're over 100,000 gross tons, and weren't Panamax standard for the width of the old locks of the Panama Canal. So Princess Cruises actually built two smaller ships in the Coral class, and it's Coral Princess and Island Princess.
That's right. Yes.
And they were built because Princess started to in the late 90s, early 2000s. They started to pioneer using gas turbines to propel their ships. The price of the fuel to run gas turbine engines was much cheaper back then than it is now, and so these ships had those gigantic airplane turbines on the funnel. Island Princesses had them removed in a refit because they're just there for decorative purposes, whereas Coral Princess still has them, so that she does stand out actually a little bit amongst the ships. But they're about 90,000 gross tons. That one allowed them to sort of fill this gap of the smaller ships, and then they have the Royal Princess and the ships in the Royal class of cruise ships. So there's a number of them. They're again a step up in terms of scale and size. Very, very large ships, and that design also has been shared with sister brand P&O, which runs Britannia, and she's of that same class of cruise ship. And then finally, they've just released the Sphere class, which is their new ship, which sort of steps away a little bit from the design philosophy that Princess has had. It's a bit of a change, a little bit like, I guess, the Edge class was a change from what Celebrity
So this is
the
Sun
previously.
Princess and the Star Princess, which is the new one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the new ones. And they got that gigantic sphere on the side of them, which is where they kind of get that class name from, because there already was a Sun class with the ones that were built back in the 1990s. We've just had Crown Princess leaving Australia on a world cruise actually, and I did a visit on board. I got to go on board the ship and just have a look around and put a video up about that. The class of ships, it's so familiar because the layout of the Grand Class is almost identical across all of the variants. And because we have two Grand Class ships that run with Carnival here in Australia, they used to operate for P&O before that, it's sort of like stepping on board and the whole thing felt familiar because everything's in the same spaces. It just looks different because it has different sort of decor put onto it. So for people who are traveling on Princess, it's very much like coming home regardless on what ship you go on. Particularly everything up to the Sphere class, because that general layout of the ship was kind of similar across those three classes of Princess cruise ship.
And who would you say, I mean, I think I know, but who would you say is the target market for Princess cruises? I mean, we know that all the lines are trying to reach younger people because they worry that their business model has a kind of aging market. So they're all trying to kind of bring that down a little bit. But where does Princess sit in that landscape of cruise companies?
Well, it's sort of in that premium brand category. It attracts people who kind of like that experience that can be very versatile and can cater for various different needs and wants. So the Princess offering, I would say, from my experience on cruising on board, is probably one of the most flexible offerings, I guess, in that it doesn't have a very strong sense of one thing or another. There's various different activities and styles and restaurant designs and ambience areas on board the ship that kind of allowed various different people from all different walks of life to come together on the Princess cruise. So how would I... And look, jump in if you disagree. But
I was going to say, you just described everything that I didn't like about it. I like a little bit more confidence. And whilst, they all the Princess ships have the most beautiful atriums with grand staircases, they're very opulent, aren't they? They look like something straight out of Saudi Arabia in a way. They have lots of gold and lots of mirror and, lots of shiny and hard surfaces as well. They don't really carpet their areas, do they? They tend to kind of go for that kind of hard floor, shiny floor,
particularly in the atrium
effect, which is great, and I really liked that atrium. I thought it was great, but the rest of the ship to me didn't kind of really meet up to that. I found the buffet layout to be really frustrating. It was all over the place, and if you wanted to go and get a dessert, you had to walk to the other end of the ship to a little patisserie area or something. It didn't quite have the... I didn't feel like they'd gone out of their way with design to really kind of get it right based on customer feedback and thinking about flow and those types of things. And I was thinking that, they did that on the first of that class of ships, and then they had 4 more coming, and they didn't change anything.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because the whole idea around that flexibility of the design. So basically, one of the greatest illustrations, I suppose, is when the Golden Princess and the Star Princess, both Grand Class ships, were moved across to P&O in Australia. Yeah. The layout is such on those ships that they were able to perfectly adapt them to become ships for a completely different brand with completely different style and offering. And I think that's one of the reasons potentially why so many people do go back to Princess over and again, because it does have that familiarity about the layout. But then when it comes to things like what you're talking about, where it's, you step away from some brands and it's like, that was a really British experience, or it was a very fun experience, or it was a very luxurious experience, where Princess sort of sits in that area where it kind of caters for different people's wants and needs in a way that allows so many different types of people to travel, but it doesn't really have that strong, I walked away and that was a very kind of thing. I don't really know exactly what the overall
I had a nice time, but I'm
I
not sure why. that kind of
thing. But that's an interesting position to hold in the market, though. I mean, I think that we're possibly that phrasing, we're being a little bit harsh, but they're able to make you feel comfortable, and it's almost as if the ship itself is in the background as much as a hotel or a resort is, and it's more about the experience that you're having in those spaces. So, for example, Princess has, I think, a very good entertainment team who's got a lot of energy on board the ships, which is something that some of the more upmarket premium brands that I've traveled on really could do with, a bit more oomph in the delivery of the onboard entertainment experience. They also have. They've themed up the various restaurants in certain ways. So whilst the ship itself is, I guess, quite neutral, the theming inside some of the dining rooms, say for example Sabatini's Italian Trattoria, which is their extra tariff Italian restaurant, it has a very strong Italian feel, which links back to the fact that all of the Princess ships were built in Italy. So there's kind of some connections there, and there's some theming in these different areas. But when you go back out to the public areas of the ship, it does of the ships that I've sailed on board, it does feel very, very neutral, I think is the best way. Although that being said, Anthony, I will say that when I traveled on the Coral Princess, she was built and designed pre-Carnival acquisition, and she is an older ship. She has beautiful teakwood boat decks. She still has some of the P&O elements inside because Princess and P&O were together for many years before the Carnival acquisition. So Coral Princess has in the ship's one of the bars on board the ship, it's all decorated in historic P&O Orient Line memorabilia.
You must have been in your element on that ship. You must have loved it.
Oh my gosh. It was amazing. Yeah. And it's like they've got more heritage on the Coral Princess than P&O UK has on the Avia and the Iona. And it's just like these little areas are so wonderful. So whilst the atrium you could be on any of the Princess ships, and the dining rooms probably you could be on any of the Princess ships, that theming of the certain areas on board, particularly with the maritime history element, that was just superb on board that ship.
So the Royal class, the Discovery that I was on, I think is the fifth of them. That was the final one that they built, and and it's effectively a carbon copy of the Enchanted Princess, which I think came in 2021, and
yes,
you know, Princess recently changed some of their inclusive offerings, and they did it the week before my cruise. So I was looking.
Oh, did they?
I remember receiving the email. Or maybe I didn't even get an email. Maybe I just read it on Cruise Critic or somewhere. And there was this huge furore about, I can't believe that they've got rid of, you know, some of the things like the Salty Dog gastropub and, you know,
They got rid of the Salty Dog?
No, they got rid of, like, it being free. You know, there was things that were included that suddenly just disappeared. You know, like getting pizza in the atrium. There was that great pizza place. And so I don't know, I just feel like we've talked before about the cruise lines kind of nickeling and diming people and how what is included is obviously disappearing as time goes on. And for new cruisers, they wouldn't notice any difference.
Yes.
But, you know, I always position myself when we have these conversations as somebody who believes that cruising should be for everybody. It's a little bit like the theatre. You know, I get very frustrated that to go and see a show is so increasingly expensive. And, in London, they're pretty good. You know, they do reduced tickets. And you can, if you go to the half-price ticket booth, you can see a show for maybe 20 quid or something. But, you know, on Broadway, you're looking at least $200 or $300 or $400 for a ticket. And to me, entertainment should be for everyone. It shouldn't be elitist. And it's the same with cruising at this kind of level. I believe it should be for everyone. Yes. And I think that, you know, it shouldn't be for the uber rich. And there is something wonderful about, you know, not being independently wealthy and being able to afford something like a cruise where you do feel like a bit of a superstar, because you are getting served in the dining room and you are being able to kind of choose, where are we going to have dinner tonight and all that kind of stuff, and not have to worry that it's going to cost you more than you already prepaid. And so that's why I really like to kind of stand up for the average person who really deserves to, you know, get the value that cruising is really all about.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from a design philosophy point of view, one of the things that they created with that original Sun class, and then carried it through to the Grand class and then to the Royal class, is the variety of entertainment venues that are available for sort of show style productions. So they have the Princess Theatre, which is the main show lounge. So that's where you've got your terrace seating, you've got the big stage. Yeah. I was looking at the stage on Crown Princess just the other day, and it's got the sort of rotation built into it. It's got an area at the top where they can bring sets down. So I've never cruised on a Grand class. I have cruised on a Royal class, and the production shows were good. On the Coral class, the production shows were good. So there's that sort of traditional cruising offering there. Right. But then they also have, as you say, they have Princess Live, which on the ships that do carry that offering, it's an extra space that has, again, some tiered seating. It has the ability to do sort of more intimate shows. They can do cooking demonstrations in there. They can do access where they want to use cameras. There was some sort of game show style things that they were doing where it was all set up to look like it was on a TV set in a TV studio, and of course they can then broadcast it into the cabins. And then at the after the ship, there's also on all three of the more traditional classes that they've got, they have this aft lounge, which
the Vista Lounge
kind of doubles as Yes, exactly, and it doubles as a not just a show lounge venue, but they do the trivia and the bingo. Again, when I was on board Crown Princess, they actually had it set up as with a buffet in there for the elite travelers and people in suites, and you can go and have a special meal in there. As part of that reward to Captain Circle reward that they give people who are very loyal to the brand, which again is something I don't really recall seeing on other cruise brands to use the entertainment venue like that. It was quite interesting, and each one's themed up differently. It actually gives for a very great versatility in the design, because you can have the main show at the front, but you can have an adults only sort of comedy show in the aft lounge. You can have the live presentations happening in Princess Live. They also have a stage in across the fleet in their shipboard pub. So there's the ability to have a drink and also watch live music, that sort of thing. So there's lots of different entertainment options. And again, they activate the atrium very well. Even in port, for example, there was violinists playing and people dancing in the atrium. But on the cruises, again, that becomes quite a vibrant area where they can do entertainment. People can look over and engage with it whilst being in the bars on the atrium level. So I think it's got it's a very versatile offering, which allows them to do quite a lot with it, which is why I think they put a lot of focus on the entertainment staff and making sure that they're activating the area as positively as possible. I
felt the ship was quite busy. They're big ships, like 160,000 tons. Certainly the class that I was on. But for that, you're getting around 3,600 people at full occupancy. And we always compare with Queen Mary 2 from Cunard, don't we? Because that ship is so big and seems to
we love it.
have comparatively so few passengers. That has around like 2,400 passengers. And is 155,000 gross tons, and so it's a similar size ship, but Princess is carrying 1,000 more passengers or more. Yeah,
that's true. And you were traveling on Discovery Princess. I went on Royal Princess. They're both from the same class. One of the big things about that class of ships, the Royal class, is they don't have a full promenade deck.
Right.
And I know this is like a broken record with me, but the problem with this was on our cruise. I don't know what it was like with yours. We had a wonderful voyage, but on the first and into the second sea day, heading down to Tasmania, it was windy and rough up on deck. So they actually closed the top decks of the ship. It's got huge open top deck areas. Basically, on a traditional cruise ship, when that happens, on the odd occasion that they have to close the top decks, you have the promenade deck to allow you to go out and just get some air and some space and go for a walk, because usually those are sheltered. On most cruise ships these days, they're a bit more sheltered. They're lower down. They've got the lifeboats over the top. But on this one, there's no promenade deck. So what we ended up with is everyone in the atrium area, and it was absolutely packed. It was super busy.
I've said to you before, I'm not very good at joining in with like arranged activities. I like to go to the theatre, I like to see a show, I like to go into a show lounge, or the Vista Lounge in this case. But I like to remain at a safe distance, just in case they pick on me, right? Maybe that's why I hated the Bright Light Society on Cunard's Queen Anne so much, because it was...
Oh, did you?
Yeah, well, because they kind of come looking for people to include in the show. And I was just like, oh, and we actually left that show.
A little tip for the Bright Light Society, just derailing it slightly, but if you ever find yourself back in there, just at the beginning, go up to them and say, I don't want to be on the show, and they won't pick you.
I'm sure.
Like, they literally will leave you alone.
I'm sure. I mean, I'd had some really nice chats with the cast before the show had actually started. But, we sat kind of at the back, so they weren't really going to pick on us. But we actually thought the show was so bad that 4 of us just walked out when we could.
Which one was it?
It was the... I forget the name of it now, but we'll flash it up on the screen
because I saw Noir on the maiden voyage, and we actually thought it was brilliant.
Oh, maybe it was Noir. Actually, maybe it was Noir.
Oh no!
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was like a whodunit, right?
I'm just too easily pleased.
Yeah. No, I like kind of more chic stuff. Like I like to see like a singer who's really good, where you just like watch and you're like, oh my God, like someone who brings all this stagecraft and very traditional and like with a really good band, I don't think you can really beat that. And unfortunately, it seems that there is this desire to kind of come up with entertainment that is a little left
plots,
field to try and create a differential between the lines and the ships. And for me, the Bright Light Society, the room was perfect to do cabaret, but classy cabaret, stylish cabaret, chic cabaret, not to do some kind of stupid audience participation whodunit that looked like it was a kid's production, or like a student's show. Am I being too harsh? I mean, tell me if I am.
I mean, everyone's got different tastes, right? Like, obviously,
sure.
I walked away from Noir thinking that was like a huge amount of fun.
Yeah.
We even had quite a few whiskeys before we went in there.
Well, that probably helps. I don't drink, so maybe that's the problem. But I feel,
and it was a maiden voyage. Like, there was just so many people there that I knew on that trip. The one thing I will say though, then again, with the Princess ships though, is if you're more into that more intimate environment, there is actually, I noticed, not just on the ones that I've cruised on, but also when I was on board Crown Princess just recently, there are pianos, like baby grand pianos everywhere. So, like on the lower level of the atrium, they have live singers. In some of the bars, they have live singers. They also have little stages in some of the restaurant areas as well, so they can do live entertainment in there. So you get that more sort of scattered around the ship live entertainment feel, which I think is one of the things that cruising was really beloved for back in the day.
Well, maybe that's what I
that's
like.
One of the things that's quite...
Maybe I like kind of classic cruise entertainment. And I suppose, Cunard have always provided that. They've tried to up the ante with Queen Anne to reach that younger crowd. But actually, a classic cruise experience with those types of piano bars that you describe, I don't think you can beat it because, you've often heard me say on this show, the reason I love a cruise is because it's so different to being on land. And how many piano bars can you find on land these days? They're just not cost effective. They can't make their rent. There's some great piano bars that just over the years, I used to go to one on Kensington High Street, directly opposite the tube station in London. I'm sure people will know it. And it was like above a shop, and it was so cool in there, like, a piano bar. Are you kidding me? Go and have some cocktails, listen to someone playing, doing a bit of singing, occasionally a special guest. So stylish, so chic, martinis. For me, that's like the golden age of cruising / entertainment. And you can see why I didn't like Noir at the Bright Light Society.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. But I guess when I'm thinking about it now, because we were talking about sort of what Princess feels like, and there is a sense of, in a funny way, there is a sense of traditional cruising about it, I think.
Right, I agree with that, yeah.
And I guess if you look back, like, we should probably mention that Princess has had quite a long history, and from its origins back in the 1960s with one little chartered ship, the Princess Patricia, it was called, through to really when it started to scale up was after the acquisition by P&O, and then the agreement to allow the filming of the Love Boat on board.
The Love Boat, yes.
I know,
and there's a new
commercial.
And what
could be more traditional?
Have you seen the new Princess commercial that
I haven't,
that features the Love Boat? Maybe it's not in your region. It hasn't come to Australia.
There's lots of love branding on board, though. Love this boat, love this cruise, love this ship.
Yeah. But they've done I thought it was the most fantastic ad I'd ever seen. And because that wonderful actress was in it from Ted Lasso, whose name I forget, I thought it was an ad for a new TV series that was set on a cruise. So I got so excited because I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? They've made a TV show about a cruise. And it wasn't. It was just an ad for Princess Cruising. But she was singing the Love Boat song because she sings as well.
Yes.
And I was like,
what is her name?
That is wonderful marketing, to be able to, it actually captured all the things that I would love Princess Cruises to be in the commercial. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, the Love Boats themselves, like, I don't know if people realize this, but there was the Pacific Princess and the Island Princess. They were both actually built and designed and built for a different cruise line, and Princess acquired them. So they originally weren't Princess Cruises ships, but they kind of then catapulted Princess into the I guess became a household name almost because of the Love Boats. And although they were the ones that the show was set on board, there was a variety of different ships that were used from time to time throughout the show. So other Princess Cruises ships, some P&O ships, even a couple of Cunard ships were just used for sort of set pieces and that sort of thing. But these two, the Pacific Princess and the Island Princess, they just became synonymous with the idea of cruising, the romance of cruising, the activities on cruise ships, dressing for dinner and the buffet restaurant, the swimming pool, and being out at sea on the deck. And various times from the 90s through to now, Princess has leaned into this. They did a reboot of the Love Boat in the early 2000s, I think, on the Sun class ships. Didn't really do the same as what the first show had done, but and then now, just recently, like the last few years, they've really lent into it with their branding, as you've mentioned. So that tells me something about the market as well. Whilst all cruise lines are trying to go for a younger crowd, and we can touch on this later because Princess has got some fantastic facilities that allow for younger people to still stay connected and do the vlogging and do Instagram and all that sort of thing. If that's what they want to do. There's also that allure, I suppose, for travelers who remember watching the Love Boat back in the 80s and want to sort of experience the brand that brought them those memories, because people get very attached to these shows that become household names, and I guess you're able to relive it a little bit on board the Princess ships.
But doesn't it defeat the object? Like, if you're trying to go for a younger audience and the Love Boat show was in the 80s, in order to have remembered anything in the 80s, you've got to be at least like 12 years of age, right? So that means you've effectively got to be over the age of 50 in order to remember the references that they're talking about. Oh, by the way...
Well, that's what I was sort of hinting on, is that they're trying to go for both markets. I think they're trying to do both.
I can see that. It was Hannah Waddingham. I just remembered her name. Hannah
Waddingham.
Is in it. And so, maybe they're going, okay, Ted Lasso audience. But then again, I think of a Ted Lasso show as appealing to people in their kind of 30s, 40s and 50s as well. So and 60s and 70s too. It's such a great show. But I get the feeling that, maybe with a lot of the ships and a lot of the lines, and we actually talked about this in episode 1, when we were talking about the maiden transatlantic crossing of the Queen Anne that I did, is that, so many of these lines, many of which are owned by Carnival. We should remind people that the Princess is, of course, owned by Carnival Corporation, along with Cunard and pretty much everything else.
We could list them, but that would take the whole show.
Exactly. That there is a struggle to define the brands, to differentiate the brands from one to the other. I think they're actually at their best. They do it best with Carnival. The fun ships. I think that the name Carnival kind of says, what it does, and that's very helpful. But that is a cheaper market, lower market, cheaper cruises, get people on, charge them a little bit when you're on board. Princess is not overpriced. I think Princess is actually a very well-priced cruise. And I bought... we should talk about the cabins, actually, because I bought a balcony cabin for myself and my wife, but we also paid for her dad to come along too. And so I managed to get him an inside cabin that was directly opposite ours, which was great.
Nice.
Because, we were able to like bang on the door and say, are you ready for dinner and stuff like that. But interestingly, on that particular class that we were on Discovery Princess, they don't have any ocean view cabins. You either have balcony... Yes. They have a lot of balcony cabins, or you have inside cabins. I think they've got like 6 ocean views that are front facing. I think they call them like deluxe ocean views, where you see the bow, but there aren't any others
actually
anywhere else on the ship.
A friend of ours was in a suite at the very bow of the Royal Princess, and he had the windows that looked out but a balcony on the side. So I don't even know if those are ocean views or if they're all like that, where they have the balcony on the port or starboard side and the forward facing windows. And it is actually one of the things about that class, is that they have so many balconies but no ocean views.
Right, which is why it looks like an apartment block sometimes when you see it going by, because there's so many balconies.
You can always, because we get a lot of recycled ships through Australia. So you go on ships from other, P&O Australia back in the day or Carnival now, and they're not necessarily built for the market. and quite often they've been ships that were designed for Princess. So we had, even if you're in the UK, for example, when you're traveling on the Ambiance for Ambassador cruises, she was designed by Sitmar but put into service by Princess back in the 90s. So there's all these ships that are sort of like have Princess origins. And one of the things that you can almost tell if it's a Princess ship is the cabin design, because they've got this sort of very familiar design across the fleet. And some of the traits that I really like about it includes that even in the smaller cabins, particularly on the newer ships, and in particularly, definitely in all of the balcony rooms, they have a little nook put aside for like a proper walk-in robe, which just gives you a little bit more space to get. Because, one of the things when you're traveling, particularly if you're traveling with lots of people in the cabin, if there's a 4-berth cabin, or if you've got like a friend that you're traveling with, trying to get ready in the cabin, like someone has to squeeze into a bathroom, which is tiny. Yeah. There's a bit more space on the Princess ships around that area to get changed. Were you on board? It would have been Medallion enabled when you were on board.
Yes, and I was going to say we should definitely talk about the Medallion, because it's so interesting, isn't it, that in some ways, I found the ship, even though it was built in 2022 or something, that I found the ship to be quite old-fashioned. Like, it didn't feel like a contemporary design in any way. And obviously I'd been corrupted because I'd already been on the Celebrity Beyond by then, and that had like blown my mind. Yeah. But the technology...
Even the cabins are quite traditional, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But the technology was actually far better on Princess than it was on any of the other ships that I'd been on. The app was better, and the for people who don't know what the Medallion is, you can wear it on your wrist or around your neck or stick it in your sock.
Yeah.
But basically...
I should have brought mine for the show. It's a little disc,
yes, I've still got mine too. It's basically like an Apple AirTag, very similar size, not an exact same size, because otherwise you'd be able to switch it into your various holders, and I've discovered that it doesn't quite fit. But the AirTag, you can either have it sent to you at home before you travel. You can ask for it to be mailed, or you can pick it up dockside when you check in, which is what we did. Yes. It takes a little bit longer to do that, so that's just a little tip. If you can get it mailed to you, it's better. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it does take a bit longer, but even then, the check-in process, because the app is so good and the pre-check-in work, the check-in I've never had a quicker check-in than on Princess. Right. It's so fast.
I remember it was very good. So the little disc is instead of a key card. So basically, you pay for everything with it. You open your door with it. It actually kind of can feel you approaching, I think, can't it? Kind of, the door starts to...
Which I don't know if I like.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that either.
I don't know if I like that.
It's a little bit like being in an accessible public toilet.
My brother-in-law, who's travelled with me a number of times when I'm a guest speaker on the various cruise lines, he tells me that I'm very consistent in my inconsistency of where I put my cruise card, and always losing my cruise card. I never lost my Medallion because it was on my wrist.
Well, I wear my cruise card in a lanyard. I bought some, and my wife takes the mickey out of me all the time, because the first thing I do when we get into the cabin is I'm like, right, here are the lanyards, and I bought these like faux leather ones that are kind of black on one side and clear on the other. And I very proudly wear it, like that. But the Medallion, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because privacy is not something everybody thinks about. Some people are crazy about it. They'll have a VPN. They don't want to share their, any of their data and all that stuff. And I've always been of the opinion that I've got nothing to hide. I don't really have any skeletons in the closet. So it's like, if there's nothing, what are you going to find out? However, and here comes the caveat. Yeah. Starlink internet, which has changed cruising in such a big way. So many people now are able to go to work and work from the ship because Starlink, which is the Elon Musk owned satellite internet service, and most of the ships have it. As good as it is, it actually isn't very secure. And this is something that people don't really talk about. You'll see the ships advertising that they have Starlink on board or now refitted with Starlink. And, Starlink's become like a kind of buzzword that everybody likes to know that they can say. But I never see anything about security. So, for example, if you're on a ship and you're using Starlink and you're doing your banking, you need to transfer funds. You've basically done a secure login over an unsecure network. And
Well, when you log into the various cruise internets, it quite often says, particularly on the iPhone, It says underneath it like unsecure network. Like any Wi-Fi, it's like going to Starbucks and using it. They're not securing it for you.
But the difference is you're on a ship for a week with a whole bunch of strangers, some of whom could be sitting with their laptops in their rooms if they wanted to, going on a hacking spree. I think we should all just be aware that these services are not particularly secure, and it's probably best not to do your online banking or anything like that whilst you're using ship Wi-Fi unless you can absolutely help it. Wait till you're on cellular in a port or something like that. Might be more secure.
I agree. I think one of the things that the Medallion app for Princess is actually, I think, probably the best that I've seen in the industry. And one of the things that it does have is it has, I know you can just use your normal chat thing on your phone now because everyone's connected whilst they're there anyway, but it has a chat function that allows you to not just talk to your friends and family and say, like, where are you? So you don't really need to track them because you can just ask them. But it also allows you to chat to the concierge desk, the guest services desk. And that is actually something I thought was really good because instead of going and queuing, because my least favorite thing on a cruise is queuing up to ask the purser's office or whatever.
You and everybody else, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like, the best thing they ever did, actually, one of the things I noticed on the Princess, on the Sun class, when I first boarded the Sun class all those years ago, was that near the guest services desk, they had a cafe. And the atmosphere was so much more chilled because if it was a long queue, people would just go and have a coffee. Whereas some other cruise lines, you go there and it's literally like just the guest services area and there's nothing to
That's a very good point,
you,
actually,
people get antsy.
Yes.
Yeah. But, rather than waiting in the queue or ringing up from your cabin and waiting on hold, you just text them and they get back to you so fast. I just tested it out. Like, I didn't really need anything, but I just said to them, like, what class is the Royal Princess? And I got a message back, "Hi, Mr. Frame. The Royal Princess is a royal class of cruise ship, and it was christened by, back then Princess Catherine." And it was just nice that they took the time to respond, but quicker than it would have been, I think, if I'd waited.
Interesting.
In line.
Well, they're probably using AI now, so it'll be even quicker.
Probably, yeah. It's probably not even a human.
I found, just going back to the cabins for a minute, I thought that the interior design of the cabins that I experienced on Discovery Princess, and it is similar on a lot of those ships, was really nice. It was like muted pastel and stoneware tones, like a kind of nice padded headboard area. The rooms aren't big, they're quite small. And notice none of them have any kind of sofa or couch, so they've kind of done away with that. So you get a little vanity, and then on the opposite side you basically just get some open shelves with the TV nearby, but there isn't really anything in the way of a sofa, which doesn't bother me because I've never really used the sofa for anything other than throwing clothes on. But it's definitely a smaller space for you to do in-room dining or any of those types of things. It can be a little restrictive. And the balconies are not particularly big on that class either, which probably explains why there's so many of them. I looked it up. There's actually 753 balconies on that class, plus 311 deluxe balconies, and then 374 mini suites with private balconies. And then 42 suites with private balconies and 2 sky suites featuring the largest balconies at sea. So, as we said earlier, it is very balcony heavy. They only have 340 inside cabins, but even the inside cabin was really well appointed. It was like a really nice, stylish, kind of upscale hotel. So I think even the inside cabin has that little nook for clothes. That's right, the open wardrobe area. So I found it to be a contradiction because I found the cabins to be really nice and they felt very luxurious. The technology was fantastic, but the food I did not think was great. The entertainment I did not think was that great, and the layout of the ship I didn't enjoy as much, the way it was set out, apart from that lovely grand atrium. So for me, it was a contradiction. But like I said, in episode 1 of this show, I still had a great time because I was on a cruise. And I will never take being on a cruise for granted. I'm only pointing things out because this is our role in this show to kind of talk about how we felt about stuff. But, I can find the joy in anything, trust me.
Yeah. I traveled on Coral Princess just after cruising reopened in Australia after the shutdown. Princess actually organised for a number of us to go on board for a little trip. So I was very fortunate to get a mini suite on that trip. And that's where you'll find your couch.
Yes.
So the mini suite design is obviously a bigger room, and it has the entrance area, very similar entrance area to all the other balcony cabins. But then you walk through, there's the bedroom, and then it goes through to a sitting area and then the balcony at the end. The balcony is noticeably bigger. There's 2 televisions, one for the sitting area and one for the looking over to the bedroom. So you do get that sort of sense of a bit more space. They're still quite narrow, but the depth of it is, I think it's bigger. I think they bring the corridor in for it, and the balcony area had a lot more space as well for multiple chairs and that sort of thing. But one of the things I really thought was quite interesting as well is the way that some of the other cruise brands are doing this now. They're introducing these interactive televisions, so you could actually do all of the you could do your room service ordering through the TV if you wanted to. You could look at your account and contact them about your account. I think there was a chat service on the television as well. I might be wrong there, but it was, as you were saying before, it was quite heavily technology enabled, which is quite interesting that it's led from a brand that is kind of positioned as an all-encompassing brand to have such a strong connection with technology. One of the things I will say though as well, Anthony, is that when you look at the structure of Carnival Corporation, Princess looks after itself. It's not managed out of another office, so it has its offices in Santa Clarita, and it has its own sort of way of doing things with Princess. So, for example, right up until the Sphere class, Princess was still using conventional drive on their ships. So all of the ships up to the Sphere class were propellers and rudders, not pods. Completely different from the rest of the direction that Carnival Corp had gone. I think the Sphere class is now using pods. And Princess had its onboard style. They have their onboard academy that teaches the staff how to do things the Princess way. It's very much self-contained. Very similar to the way Holland America is self-contained as its own entity. It runs by, it has its own structure. It doesn't coexist with other brands, which is quite different from when you look at Cunard and P&O, which are run from Carnival UK, and the two brands have some sort of intermixing when it comes to the people that are running them, which I think gives Princess that ability to do things that we might look at and go, why did that brand do it? But it wants to do it because it wants to challenge its perceptions potentially, or has an internal goal that they want to achieve that is separate to the rest of the Carnival Corporation. And I think it's because when they acquired P&O Princess, technically it was a merger, although ultimately we know Carnival was the one that survived. That it was an acquisition that they called a merger, but Princess was always quite independent from that very start. So it's just interesting to see the way that the different Carnival Corp brands are managed, and there's no one way of doing it really, even across that entire,
which is good, isn't it? Because you know, one of the things that we don't like about these hostile takeovers, or whatever you choose to call it, where companies are all brought under the same umbrella, is where they try to centralize things, and so everything is the same. And really the joy of cruising and the joy of finding the ship or the line that works for you is those differences in the service and in the food and in the style and the layout. And it's interesting how some ships, older ships especially, and it's the same for Princess, the older ships definitely have older interiors, apart from the ones that have had full refurbishments. And it's probably best that we talk more about, when you do your due diligence about booking a cruise, the first thing I would do is, when was the ship built and when was it refurbished? These things matter to me. And some people, they would never think to do that, but as we've talked in the past on other episodes about like Celebrity, I like the Millennium class, which is a very old ship, and they've been fully refurbished. The news has just come out that Celebrity are going to be upgrading or renovating their entire Solstice class ships, starting with the Solstice itself in March 2026, which I think you're going to be going on shortly afterwards, which means you're going to get to see what it's like. And I've often, we talk about Celebrity a lot. It's my favorite of the lines to travel on, but I've always said that the Solstice class is such a missed opportunity because these ships are 15, 20 years old now and they're really showing their age. And I'm so pleased that obviously Celebrity were watching this show and they decided to invest $100 million in every ship. And they're literally gutting those ships. They're going to do a full renovation, including of every single cabin, which is great because, as we said before, the interiors, they look like kind of Marriott hotel from the 80s. And so I'm really pleased that these renovations are happening. And so with Princess, we've got these 5 ships that we've been talking about that really do hold up. But the moment you go to the class before that, they do look a little dated. And now, of course, we have these 2 new Star and Sun Princess ships, which are so fantastic looking. Probably, I was going to say they look iconic, but they look almost more iconic than the Icon class to me. I think that Princess have done a wonderful job with the look and the feel of these giant new ships. They're big, they're 175,000 tons. These ships, they're not like mega ships, but they are mega ships.
They're sizable, yeah. They have a presence. It's interesting when you look at the design of the exterior design. There's elements of the various classes. So there's like the pylons that hold the bridge wings up, which is from the Grand class. And there's the very balcony heavy design, which is from the Royal class. But Princess, from my knowledge, at least from my experience, they haven't done those full refurbishments where they pull everything out. So even on the Royal Princess, which, I think it was 2013, like she's the first in that class, it's that standard plastic Fincantieri bathroom in the balcony cabins. You know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's like a hospital bathroom,
Exactly, and that's the same on the mini suite I saw on board Crown Princess has got that same sort of. It's got a bath and it had tiled floors, which gives it a bit more, elegance. But it looks its age, I suppose.
And they all have shower curtains. Even the newer ones. I think Sun and Star Princess have glass doors in their bathrooms.
Well, that's the way.
I think. But anything before that on Princess, you're definitely going to have that shower curtain cling to your body with the soap that dries out your skin.
There's no app on the Medallion to help you with that, unfortunately. I always used to think to myself, QE2, for example, was refurbished in 1994, and they gave every one of the bathrooms that didn't have a bath a shower door. And if they can do that in 1994 on a ship that was built in 1969, I do not understand why it is not standard across the whole fleet.
It's so funny. Interesting. I think bathroom design has changed. We talked about this before. I talked about these prefabricated marble effect panels that they've started using. Yeah. And they're great for retrofitting because you can literally, redo a bathroom very quickly, as Celebrity has done with the Summit, the Millennium class ship. And so, it is possible, but you often think these companies, obviously, these companies have to make a profit, and they do make huge profits. But putting that money back into the ships, it happens occasionally. And the fact that Celebrity have just announced that 5 ships are going to be getting a full renovation, it's probably going to take a couple of years at least to get those done, if not longer.
I'm so glad Solstice is the first because I was looking forward to. I'm looking forward to now going on board after the changes. You made me feel a bit nervous in episode 4 when you were talking about
I didn't enjoy
like
Solstice because it was so dark. I didn't. To me, it didn't. But they've talked about. I mean, we'll have to do another episode discussing this. But they're really taking advantage of some of those spaces that never got used. There was like a weird quasar nightclub on the Solstice class that never got used. And even the lawns on the top. The grass lawns. I think they're creating some proper outdoor deck space with some beautiful furniture and getting a vibe going, which is great. So look, there's lots to look forward to. There's so many new ships that are coming out, and I think that Princess, with these two new classes this new class of ships, has really kind of told us where they want to head. They want to kind of maintain that direction of doing good technology. I just want them to improve the food, because to me there is a difference between those 5-star ships and the 6-star ships, and then the 4-star ships. And I would put Princess in the 4-star category. That's just my that's my star rating. That's not an official star rating, but it did feel very much like a 3.5, 4-star experience, despite the anomalies like the technology and the beautiful rooms.
Yeah, I think, and the food is very. I found on my I've done 2 cruises since the pandemic, that the food quality is quite variable. Yeah. So on the Coral Princess, for example, we had absolutely fantastic meal in the Bayou Cafe, which is now the Crown Grill. They refurbished it just recently, but it was this wonderful Louisiana themed dining room, and we had lobster, and we had this amazing soup that they did, and it was just it was superb. But then some of the things that they really lean into on Princess. So I'd heard that Princess had the best pizza at sea. And
that's right.
I can't see why anyone would say that with the experience that we had. Yeah. It was busy. The maitre d' at the entrance tried to talk us out of coming into the restaurant. Wasn't, we're going to have a long wait. Are you sure you want to do this? We came in because we've been told how wonderful it was. This is on Royal Princess. It was very, very slow service. The pizzas arrived and the crusts were like eating a porcelain plate. It just wasn't what I expected. Yeah. And that was such a shame, whereas it can be so good. So it really depends, I think, on the venue and what the atmosphere is on the ship. Like, we obviously had so many people indoors that everyone was trying to do the same things. Maybe they were just a bit stressed that particular occasion. And
it's also hard to maintain the consistency. You have different chefs, you have a high turnover of staff. Effectively, I mean, how they can say, okay, well, that ship has got the best pizza. I find that in my neighborhood, we have coyotes running around here, and sometimes on the community website, people write, quick, there's a coyote, and he's on the junction of thing and is there, be careful. And I'm thinking, by the time anyone's going to read this, that coyote is at least 3 miles away. and so, it's the same with pizza on ships as I see it. Oh, that ship's got the best pizza, or the best burger, or the best this or that. And it's there are so many variables in terms of, as we've discussed before, just the buying, the inventory, the storage, the cooking, who's doing the cooking, how long it's been sitting out. You could make the best pizza, and if you don't get to it as it comes out the oven, actually you want to wait about 5 minutes because you'll burn the roof of your mouth. But it can taste like the worst pizza if you get it at the wrong time. So there are so many variables. And so I never take that kind of advice, really. I just kind of go with what I see. And I found the buffet to be a little bit lackluster. And, they have these kind of Alaskan-named dining rooms, the Ketchikan and Juneau dining rooms on board. And
well, they actually have different the restaurants are all named differently on the different ships, which I think is quite nice. Yes. They have their own style that is a bit different from some of the cruise brands.
Yeah, but the food was nothing special. It didn't even pass my father-in-law's test, and he'll pretty much eat anything. And so he was like, no, I don't. This is not good food, which was a shame. But I'm not saying we didn't. I think we ended up paying for a meal because I was just like, the free or the included offerings, they just weren't quite up to scratch. But like I say, you could have a completely different experience depending on who you are, time of day, where in the world the ship is sailing. There are so many variables, and that's why.
Did you? Sorry, did you try the gelato on board?
Yes, I tried the gelato on board.
Yes,
yeah.
I thought that was quite good. That was one of our favorite things.
It was good. But I don't get really excited about things like that. I just like things done simply and really well. And sometimes in the dining room I found that the Princess food was quite small. There wasn't very much of it in main dining. I felt like they were trying to reduce portion size a little bit. And it just wasn't really very special, but that's okay. It's still a cruise, and this is the thing. Cruising, it's very personal. It's very personal, and you're never going to get terrible food. I'd rather eat food that's average, that arrives on time and is hot. I don't want to wait for food. That to me is more frustrating. So I like a dining room that is working well, and the servers are working well, and you have a nicer experience. And I can happily put up with food that's not great if the vibe is good.
I have had terrible food on a cruise, and I have also travelled with a friend who got food poisoning on a cruise. So watch out.
Yeah, you have to be careful. I mean, I wouldn't it's a bit like people who say, I always go have sushi on the ships. I'm like, don't have sushi on the ships. I just would never eat sushi on a ship. Sushi is supposed to be caught fresh. It's supposed to, it's supposed to be literally sea to table. And it's just too many risks. I wouldn't eat mussels. I don't really eat that much seafood. I mean, I'll have the lobster tail because that thing's been broiled to within an inch of its life, But it's about making smart choices in that environment. But I think Princess is going in the right direction, and I would like to think that it's a line that I would recommend, but as long as you get a really good deal. I wouldn't overpay for Princess. I'd pay half of the advertised fare, and you're going to have a great time.
And I think the other thing about Princess as well is because it has that very broad appeal, you do find so many. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I talk to people about which cruises they've been on, nearly always there will be a Princess ship in there somewhere. Because they've got a big fleet, they've got a broad footprint. They're operating here, they're operating in Alaska, they're operating, on the east coast of the United States. They've got cruises into the Mediterranean, so they are, and into Asia cruises as well, based out of Japan at times. So they do have a very broad footprint. Lots of people have tried it. I guess that's why they keep that market where they're sort of appealing to a very broad base, because they are, I guess, one of the brands that has that footprint that's so widespread. But we have to dock Princess Patricia now, Anthony, because we've now reached our hour. It's amazing how quickly it goes, actually. Yes,
it does when you're having fun. And whenever we do this show and I haven't eaten beforehand and we start talking about all the MDR, I just need to go and get some snacks now.
Oh, we should go off to the Bayou Cafe and have some lobster.
Yes, that would be lovely. I'd love that. And then we'll walk for about 5 hours to go and get dessert afterwards from the other end of the ship. Okay, well, listen, don't forget this show is available as an audio podcast as well. So if you want to listen to it as well as watch it, you can do that on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get yours. If you missed any of the first 6 episodes and you want to go back and have another listen, then please do. You can dip in and out anytime you like, and we'll continue showing up every week and talking about our favorite subject, which is cruising.
That was great.
See you next time. Take care.
Take care.